Welcome to the Finding Purpose podcast. My name is Adam, and I am your host. I just want to thank everybody for um, listening to the last couple episodes. I just recently spoke with Renee V, based out in Philadelphia, who has launched her mindset coaching business and is going to be part of some amazing upcoming events. Additionally, I was also able to speak with my friend Brian Howie the week before, who actually is the manager of the studio that I usually record out of, but he also has had such a great story, and the engagement that I got from that conversation, I greatly appreciated. I am really lucky today to have my friend Kate Hastings here with me today for this conversation. Kate, I connected with because we shared a mutual friend who had been featured on our the podcast on an earlier episode. Our friend Nick Scopoletti, and she had commented on one of the pieces of content that I had submitted, and I kind of just like dug into what she was doing, and I really liked her messaging and her immersion into the mental health field and the work that she does in inspiring folks through her story and her experiences, and how she's grappled with her obstacles to really dive into a relationship with herself. Kate, um, it's a pleasure to have you. It's
Thank
sunny over
you.
there.
It is. It is sunny. It was just downpouring, so it could sometimes suddenly get dark. So if it goes dark, it's because there's a storm that just rolled in from Florida.
That's funny. I was actually just in South Carolina during that last hurricane, and I thought I was going to like, enjoy the beach, and it was it's the same thing. It gets dark when it like storming down there,
Yeah.
and yeah, so like I was there for the entire time, and it was raining, and then I ended up like the storm was coming up north, and it was like driving up through Virginia, and I was literally just tracking with the storm. I was like, it was terrible, but it was a good time because I got to see family and friends. Um, but Kate, I really wanted to kind of just jump right into it with you. Like I was drawn to you, and when I dug into what you were posting on social media, like a lot of it really resonated with me because you um, are very in tune with just like healing, and you're not afraid to get vulnerable with sharing your story. That's something that like I think is really important. Being that we do have that mutual friend Nick, and you originally from Connecticut, which we had discovered in an earlier conversation. I'd love to learn more about like your earlier days, and the different transitions you went through to who you are now. So maybe we could start from the beginning.
Yeah. So I grew up in Monroe, Connecticut, and I have a wonderful mom and dad and brother. And I have a father who struggled with mental health and addiction growing up. And, that created some chaos in the household. But, it's like everyone does their best that they could. And I have a great relationship with him, but that doesn't mean sometimes our parents impact us in ways that, hinders our ability to develop into functioning human beings when we become adult, when we have like unaddressed trauma. So I would say like probably the second grade, I was diagnosed with multiple learning disabilities, one including dyslexia and just like difficulty processing information. So I really, really struggled in school. So I think low self-esteem really started at a very young age, not feeling, good enough or not processing the things and not feeling like you're accomplished in school because that's like a big part of your day. And when you're put into smaller classes or you're made to feel different, we just internalize that as a child, right? And then
Mm.
I would say probably like the fifth grade, I developed bulimia. And I think the combination between like school, the house being a little bit chaotic or a lot of chaotic, and then just a way to find something to soothe and release and control was for me was an outlet of food. And then, I started my first pretty much abusive relationship when I was 16. And then when I turned like 14 to 21, I drank heavily, smoked, it was a pretty destructive lifestyle. And when I found myself at 21, I thought, okay, I could go down one or two paths here. Like I could continue on this path of like partying and self destruction, or I could change my life. And then that's when I found fitness and, I got off Adderall, I stopped drinking. and I really found the healing benefits of like food and really, healed my eating disorder. But the mental part of the eating disorder, you know, kept continuous on like for long periods of time, like the body dysmorphia, um, just the, obsessive compulsive need to control or restrict food. I went from one extreme of binging to then one extreme of like having a six pack. If you never really
Hmm.
heal the core of your mental illness or any disorder you're dealing with, you just kind of transfer it into one other aspect of your life, which thankfully I transferred it into fitness and just channeled myself in that way. But again, I think too much of a good thing could sometimes be bad. And I started to fight at 23. I found Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I competed for 8 years, and then I just was a personal trainer, heavy into like weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting, and that just changed my life. And then I just always felt like something was off and wrong with me, and like, how can I be this healthy person and do all these right things? And I knew nothing of like emotional health, like the impacts of like unresolved childhood trauma in your body and your nervous system. And I was repeating these cycles of abusive relationships and all that. So that all kind of came to a head when I was 30, and really transformed my life and developed the podcast and my business, and just kind of went from there.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's quite like a evolution of just like different phases of your life. Um, yeah, I mean, I do believe that like a lot of the things that happen on early in your life kind of set a foundation, whether they're underlying and whether you're like aware of them. Like it, you can't really like identify them until you actually like do dig into like the mental health component and become interested in just like your own emotional intelligence and what you know and what you don't know. Um, Now that you are more attuned with your where you are emotionally and where you are mentally, when you look back at certain points in your life, what kind of feelings does that bring up?
I think there was a big part of my healing journey that I had to grieve a lot, because you realize when you're connected to your emotions and your body, you could then process what happened to you. So there was a good year or two that I was processing a lot of things that had happened to me. And I was so dissociated for a very long time. So I couldn't even feel pain. And then, doing some other work on myself, I was able to finally feel my emotions again. And that was really overwhelming too. So it's a process. I think it's definitely now I could talk about it. I don't cry. There's no we're always going to have, there's a difference between having wounds in your life, like you have these open wounds. I used to live my whole life like an open wound all over my heart and my body, and now I just have scars. There's a constant reminder of the things that I've once been through, as a testament of my like testimony of life and things that I went through. But by no means does it shape my beliefs or my identity or my habits or my behavior. And that doesn't mean that sometimes old thoughts or ways of being want to come visit, but it's a matter of like being able to act it out or not.
Kate, I think you froze.
You there? Can
Hello?
you hear me?
I
Oh,
can
there
hear
you
you
go.
now.
Okay.
Um, I got you at scars. Like I just have scar. I
Okay.
just have scars. I don't know how long you went after that.
Okay. I don't know how long I've been after. um, I said, in we're always going to have wounds in our life, right? Like we have emotional wounds, we have physical wounds, and it's a matter of like healing those wounds so they turn into scars, so that they no longer affect you in a way that is disabling, like where you're not emotionally reactive or behaving in a way that's operating from a past wound, the way that you hear things, the way that you see things. So I don't have that kind of, those issues anymore. But yeah, I have scars.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you were talking about early on was like how your father suffered from mental health issues, and I recently had a guest who specializes in adult children's of alcoholics, and
Mm,
I do think they're very similar. Where like you do have a parent in the house who isn't taking care of their own mental health or is abusively drinking, whether like they actually like physically like harm you or they yell at you or whatever. It's like you see things, and at a very young age, like it's going to impact you because of just like the emotional distance. Um and that's what she specialized in, and I learned a lot about that. Where like I don't my parents weren't very, they weren't like abusive in any way, but like emotionally, I'd never really felt as connected to them, and where I would like go to like um friends' houses and kind of see how they move with their family and friends. And I think that's really where early on you get that model of comparison, when you're like, all right, like is this how a regular household like runs? Or and you don't have any semblance of normalcy. And I think um you know at the end of the day, my parents did the best that they could, but there was like somewhat of a disconnect um, when it was growing up, where like I felt like physically safe and like comfortable with them, but like when it came to like trusting them with like my feelings, I knew that their perception of feelings was very black and white. So I didn't go to them for emotional comfort, or as much as like I saw my other friends do it. And now I look at like parents like best friends with their kids, and they're like telling them everything. It's like I didn't really have that. And then like, do you think like, when you talked about like bulimia and having eating disorders, um when you were recovering from that, what was the process like? Did you do 12 step, or what channel did you use?
Fitness, really. I mean, I thought, okay, I never went to therapy. I never got help. I just found fitness, and I found the healing in food and like removing the food that once made me sick. But honestly, I at first I just went from one extreme to the other, right? So I went from like binge eating to throwing up to all of that to then eating just like boiled chicken and sweet potatoes and becoming like that kind of bodybuilder, restrictive way of being. And then I saw the results from that, and I thought, okay, I really want to change this. Even though I stopped throwing up, I dealt with a lot of dysregulation, control issues, body dysmorphia, thoughts of unworthiness, obsessing about how my body looked for a long time, even though I stopped the action of bulimia, like throwing up. So,
Mm. I mean, how did you find that balance? Because I always, whenever I speak to someone who, where food is their addiction, like,
mhm,
I think that's the hardest addiction to overcome in general, because
yeah,
you need it, like
yeah.
you absolutely need it. Um, how were you able to like find that balance? Was that once you embarked on the mental health component?
No, it was earlier on. Like I got off Adderall, I think around 22, 23 years old. And then I thought, okay, this is going to not suppress my appetite anymore. So I have to like learn how to learn how to reprogram my appetite and to learn the healing benefits of food. And it's really about relationship too. So like, if you treated your food how you treated a relationship, I always ask people, would you date that person? And more times than not, the answer is no. So when I worked on like the anxiety, the dysregulation, the depression, um, finding different ways to cope, because we're all trying to cope, so I just cope by exercising a ton, right? And too much of a good thing could also be bad. So it honestly not until like my later 20s, like 20s, early 30s, that I really able to heal like the mental aspect of that too.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I never really thought about like treating the relationship with food, but like, I mean, I get it, because people use food to address emotions, more so than like, and when you're leaning on it more to address emotions than to just like what it's supposed to do, like sustain your body, then you might be abusing that relationship. Um, do you? What other things like were going in life you like mentioned, like relationships? Um, can you kind of dig into that a little bit?
What about the relationship? What do you like?
Well, you said
What did I?
you were in several like abusive relationships. Um, Can you share a little bit more about that and like maybe expand on it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, when we develop as a child, our earlyhood um, experiences shape our attachment style. So, have you ever heard of like attachment theory?
Yes.
Okay, so I had a father who was inconsistent and always came and left, right? Who was like struggling, or there was like some sort of like inconsistency. So that created within me an anxious attachment style. So, when I started to date at 16, I would date men who would more times than not kind of mimic what I saw and felt was normal growing up, which was someone who was, sometimes who struggled or was unkind or someone who abandoned me. That was what felt normal. And so I remember thinking, like, why does the same person keep showing up in a different body? I was like, oh, law of attraction, all these kind of things. And I
Hmm.
was the one who was always like saving these men and enabling them and feeling like I was like special because I would tolerate this and help them and, just be a kind person, which was really codependency and people pleasing, all these things I didn't know. But like we are our cycles and our patterns, and we are what our nervous system is kind of used to. And my nervous system was really used to unkind, inconsistent, um, typically narcissistic partners. And so that's what kind of felt normal to me until around like 30 years old was like my first healthy relationship. And I remember thinking, I don't know what to do with this. I didn't know really what he was doing, and it was so unfamiliar. And that's where I really saw like, oh, there's something wrong here. And the things that I had been through kind of validated my pain, and it kind of assured me like, oh, that was wrong, because you would be with men who said like, don't be a baby about that, or they would kind of put you down or suppress your feelings. And if you date someone long enough, or you date consistent people long enough, you tend to believe that when you don't have a sense of identity or purpose or worth as a woman.
Yeah, I mean, I think like they say, like you grow up to marry your own mother. On
Mhm.
the male side, like it's very much the same way. Um, like I think like as I've embarked on my healing journey, like understanding like um relation. I mean, I always look at like me being in recovery. You know, in my darkest moments, like any relationship that I had was abused, and it was mistreated, and you know for a while, like now I could kind of acknowledge that, like it wasn't that like I was literally physically incapable of maintaining and nurturing a relationship the way I should. um in recovery, obviously, like my perspective on relationships has completely changed, where it's very much like an opportunity for mutual growth in any relationship, and someone who adds value to my life. And I was very, I wouldn't say I was, yeah, I was like not the abusive, but I was completely negligent of all relationships. Um, when you grow, like what advice do you give to your clients when they come to you with relationships issues, and how do you guide them through um like obstacles regarding just falling into older habits?
I think anything that like shows up in our life, like something like a toxic relationship, is a byproduct of what we believe about ourselves. Because who I am today as like a woman, it would be nowhere near what I would date back then. And it's a matter of like your belief system, your value system, having standards, having values. So it's very easy to get focused on, oh, this person is X, Y, and Z. But it's like, well, why are you even dating a person like that? What do you believe within yourself that you think you're deserving of someone who is neglectful or abusive or mistreats you or doesn't even like acknowledge or pay attention to you? Like that's a byproduct of what you genuinely believe deep down inside as a person, and it tends to have to do with unworthiness or low self-esteem or believing that they're not deserving of love. So I address those things. I'm not even worried about what they're attracting or their relationship. I could see cycles and patterns for sure, but again, that's just a byproduct of like addressing the core issues and core things in our life that need addressing, because we don't play out like things by accident.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I think also a lot of it has to do with them becoming honest with themselves,
Mhm.
and like accepting their roles in it. Like I think, um, I've I've witnessed like a lot of, like I myself, myself, like in order for me to be present in other relationships, I had to be honest with who I was and what I truly was offering in a relationship to really even begin to like have the relationship grow. Um, you know, when I'm sure that like the clients that you help, um, can you like explain kind of like the process that you go to when like you're like onboarding them, and then what do you do? Like you obviously cater each program to them.
Mhm. Yeah, so I first see if we're a fit, right? Because I don't think that everyone is a fit to work with you. And I always make sure that if that person needs more help, that I definitely direct them in an area that they could get the help that they need, like active addiction. I've fallen into a few people where like 2 months later, I come to find out they're like actively addicted to Xanax. And it's like, those are things that I don't feel qualified to do. And that I definitely encourage like the 12-step program, it sponsors and, things of more help than I could provide. So I always see if I'm a fit, if I could help you, and if I can for sure. Um, we go through like the list of things, and I say like the willing of transformation that will happen is the willing of action you're willing to take, and it's sometimes scary, but um, I'm not like an educational based coach. There's so much information online that you could learn about, and it's about building courage and discipline and really getting to like those honest places about ourselves and realizing, okay, like this doesn't work about myself. Like, I've dealt with people who have been severely traumatized to people who are quite successful, like lawyers or psychologists who just want to up level their life and their game. I think we could all use discipline. And I think the way that we apply discipline in our life is very much a forceful willpower way of being. And I think when you can really lead and integrate your emotions into your behaviors and actions with awareness and understanding, that you could be so much more successful. Because I was a very disciplined person and I was very rigid in my ways, and like it wasn't producing or bearing fruit. And I thought, how can I be this disciplined and I'm still not successful? And so it was like that mental and emotional part was kind of missing. So that's pretty much what I do with them.
When was like the major like aha moment for you on in your journey?
Um, I think there's a few aha moments, but the first healthy relationship I was in, I was like, oh, wow, okay, I think there's something really wrong here. And because it's very distracting to stay in unhealthy relationships and not be able to focus on yourself. And so when I didn't have to focus on another broken person and I had the mirror was kind of in front of me, I thought, oh, okay. When I decided to leave Miami, I definitely thought, okay, my time is done here and I want a second chance and I want to start things over. And if I want to be successful and I really want to be who I say I am and I want to help people, I have to really address these things in my life, because I don't think you could lead people if you struggle with, like, I can't be over here in an abusive relationship trying to help people on an emotional level. I don't believe that. I think you are what you need to walk out in life. And not to say that there's hardships, but to be a person of like integrity and to live a certain life, to be able to help people and be the space for healing. So that was a big moment. And then my life and relationship to God was definitely a huge moment for me.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, obviously, leaning into faith is, um, a huge part of your healing journey. Have you always been? Um, I feel like you're more spiritual than religious. Correct me if I'm wrong, or do you lean into like, are you with the church?
I think church is definitely a place to touch home, to have community, to hear the word of God, to worship music. But what I believe as a follower of Jesus is like who you are 6 days out of the 7 days, and church is just one day. Church is not, I mean, religion is one thing and relationship is another. And I think when we start to think that we need to perform or we need to do these things and act this way and not do this and point the finger, that sometimes can get into the religion aspect of
Mm.
Christianity. But what matters to me is just following Christ and living a God honoring life that is pleasing and good to Him. So that was not my life for a long time. I was like really wrestling with God in 2019. It was the last really bad relationship, and I was brought to my knees. And I thought, well, I need something and someone right now, and I don't know who it is. I always believed in God, but not Jesus. And that's what really led me on my journey. I kept showing up to church and I couldn't understand, and I left, but I'd keep showing up. And then finally in 2022, I decided to fully give my life to Christ. So it was the best decision ever.
What was like when you turned to Christ, what was there someone who like was that messenger for you, or was it you just kept going and eventually you got the message?
No, there is a very special family. They're called the Oaks. They're down in Miami, and Austin and his beautiful wife Kristen. Where I met them in the jujitsu gym I trained at, and I was very close with one of their daughters, Lucy. And they just kept loving me, and they kept pouring into me, and they just kept showing up for me. And I didn't understand what they were really doing at first. And I saw their marriage, and I saw how he treated her, and their dynamic. And she's beautiful, and she's a doctor, and he's a business owner, but she is just this beast of a mom and a woman, but so beautiful and classy. And I thought, like, I really want that, and they just kept loving me at my lowest points and never, shaming me and guilting me. And their love is what really, led me to believe. And they baptized me. And they're just incredible human beings and special people in my life. So I'm forever grateful to them.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, having folks like that in your life to lead you to this free place that you are in. Now that you have that connection with God, um, when you're reflecting on parts of your story, has it completely changed your perspective? And if so, like how? Like how do you look at like some of the things that happened in the past?
I could look back and say God's hand has always been in my life. The fact that I'm still here, the fact that I'm still alive, the fact that even at my lowest points, something always came through, something always showed up, something always was there to save me or help me, or like the strength in which the things that I've endured and gone through. I don't know how I've gotten through certain things. And it's only by God's grace, and that the fact that he's like, she's going to have a story, and she's going to help people, and she's going to help women, and she's going to help people who want to kill themselves. And there's going to be a purpose in all this. So I could always look back at my life and say the money always came through, the house always came through, the ending of that relationship always came through, like the next person always showed up, that friend, that job, that money, everything. So yeah, I wish I came to him a lot sooner, but
Yeah, no, I mean, but that was the plan.
yeah.
You're supposed to go through what you went through in order to find him in that moment. And I think that's like there's something special about that because um like people associate regret to a lot of the things that have happened to them. And I think when you have that turning point and in your case obviously discovered Christ, you understand that things happened for you. And like that in itself is a game changer. And like my story is the same way, where it's um like I run a spiritually based 12-step program. I do have a God in my life that has protected me, and I understand that. And sometimes it just takes that moment when you're like, you know what, like given everything I've been through, God had to have been there,
Yeah.
because most people wouldn't have survived what I've been through. So that in itself for me was a very um clear indicator that it was absolutely necessary for me to invite him back in. And that's something like I share a lot with other folks who are in the 12 step program I work, because that's something they grapple with a lot, because I think um the more power the bad things that you've been through have, the further away you are from acknowledging that there is a God. And um I say that, like, like God's like, God doesn't have to raise his voice when he's sitting right next to you,
Yeah.
and
Oh, it's beautiful. I
like
love that.
like like at the end of the day, like he was always like I don't know how, but like he was always kind of navigating me out of these situations. And like shame on me for not just like talking to him for a minute and thanking him. And now that like, you know, I'm on this journey of where like I want to grow with him by my side. I think it's important to nurture that relationship like I do any other relationship. And I have my relationship with God is going to be different than your relationship with God's going to be different than anybody else's relationship with God. But like, that's what makes it so special, you know? Um, do you think that, like when you do what you do with your clients and they have their opinions on faith and the role that it can play in their lives, um, do you integrate it into the coaching, or is it like, hey, listen, this is what works for me, and maybe it could work for you?
Yeah, so I will always respect. I always ask them, like, what is it that you believe? So I could reference your faith, whatever that is. So I always ask that question, whether it's like they don't believe in God or they do believe in the universe or they do believe in Christ, which is awesome when I get to work with people on that part. But what's just so incredible is like the opportunity God has been giving me to meet people who don't believe in Christ and them inquiring me about it, which is so awesome. I'm so open. I'm so vulnerable when it comes to that from the perspective of it's very rarely that you could probably can't offend me at all when it comes to faith. Like I've had, conversations with people who like, oh, I don't believe in God. He's a terrible God. And I'm like, tell me what happened that you believe that. I'm not trying to shove the gospel down someone's throat. I think that God doesn't hurt people. I think people hurt people and church hurt people. And so I think there's a difference when you could really hear and understand people from that. And then, of course, when someone does have the faith, it's even, I go all in with that because I have the reins too. And then there's people who ask me, and I'm always honest about my faith. Obviously, I'm very open about my faith. And then there's people who don't, and that's totally fine too. I still love and I pray over every client, I pray over every session. So there's not a matter of me ever being um, quiet or not proactive, even when it isn't a believer. I will still pray for them.
It's I'm gonna be really honest with you. Like in the beginning of this conversation, I wasn't exactly sure where we were going because, like, we talked about your like your story, and you went through it, and like it's kind of cool because I haven't really had an episode wholly based around leading with faith, and I think it's such an important topic to talk about because um um it works. And I think that like it makes people uncomfortable sometimes to talk about their faith, because I get it, it is personal. And when they talk about faith, um you know they're afraid of offending others, or they're afraid of like other people accepting them for their beliefs. And I think it's just super cool how like um how free you are, and how like the conversation completely shifted, and how like you're just like it's just beautiful to like hear you talk about it, because the underlying sense of gratitude that you have and when you talk about it is just very prevalent. um a lot of the things that you have posted recently have been like pretty extensive when you're talking about like um healing. And I don't know like whether you post like kind of just like what you're feeling in the moment. Um but the last post that you were do you mind if I like talk about it?
Yeah, no, okay. Yeah, I
Because
posted it
I
to everyone to
really,
see.
well, yeah, no, sorry. But I really liked one specific thing that you said in it. Um it was a radical gratitude. And um I tried to practice gratitude, logically listing all things, but my heart couldn't feel it. And then you wrote frustrated. I go, why can't I feel anything? And discovered disassociation. And I think that's like it's cool because I think a lot of people have been in that moment where they're like, um, like I should feel good about something, but I don't.
Right.
Um, you know, when you first became like interested in identifying these feelings and what's wrong with me, and how freeing was that for you? What was that process like in the early days?
I think when you haven't ever had something and then you have it, it's even more special. I think when you've always had something, we sometimes take things for granted. Like I live in beautiful Florida, but I'm always so in awe of the ocean and the palm trees. I just hold that perspective of never allowing the beauty of nature or the simplicity of things that I never had for a long time. Like just my home as a simple example. Like we grew up in a home and my mom was amazing and she always put food on the table and we always had great Christmases, but there was this chaotic aspect to our home that didn't have peace. And so my home is such a peaceful place and there's just such gratitude with my things being safe and my bed and my door and it's being shut and it's locked up. So I think when you haven't had something for a long time or you never had it, I think it's a different type of appreciation that you feel. And my friend, my mentor, I call him my mentor, who led me to Christ, he would talk about this thing called joy, and I would question like you just wake up and you feel happy for no reason. And I didn't like understand that concept and I would be like gratitude and joy like and that's when I kind of realized like oh I don't think I could feel anything but like extreme desperation or extreme like high intensity training where I felt like these low lows and these high highs. I was just like that very imbalance like 0 to 100, never like being able to say oh I'm frustrated or I'm angry or I'm in pain. That was a huge thing. I couldn't. Why I was able to tolerate abusive relationships for so long was because I was so disconnected from pain. Like I couldn't even, pain was so normal to me that it was something that was familiar, that it was like if it wasn't there, that was weird. So
Hmm.
just those things kind of started to, and then I would see normal people, kind of like what you said with your friends. I would see like other relationships where I see people a lot younger than me and their life looked a lot different. And I thought, why am I so disciplined? How do I have all these things, but they have that? And it was never from a place of like jealousy or envy. I was more curious as to why I wasn't functioning human being at the age that I was. So I had like,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
was so dysregulated and depressed and anxious, and I was a people pleaser and you're codependent and you're like, you feel like you're this kind person, but it's really all this counterproductive behavior that's keeping you in this cycle of like never fulfilling and bearing fruit in your life. And then you lay your head on the bed, you're like, I'm still empty. And that's where God came in and was like, you're full of me now. And that's been like the best. You could take it all away, anything. And if I have God, I have everything. So,
well, I think that's beautiful, like what you said, like, yeah, like just like the little things in life, that like your bed and your door, like once you become grateful for these little things, then the big things are just like almost like added enhancements to your joy. And like that's something where like, I know that I have, and I feel like a lot of people take um day-to-day gifts for granted. And
mm,
when you don't have that gratitude and appreciation for the small things, then like I think that's what kind of breeds into this like entitlement culture that we essentially have, that is very prevalent and is easy to get sucked into if you don't check yourself, with gratitude lists, or however you choose to just acknowledge, what you have is enough, um, can really just like put everything into perspective. And like, for me, like one of the things which was really important um was incorporating that daily into my routine, and being able to like pause and just kind of look around, and as you alluded to with nature, just like look around and things are actually beautiful, and just having that dramatic perspective shift, um really changed my entire outlook on life, because um when I was in active addiction, yeah, like very similar to you, where it was like that high serotonin with just like getting drunk or doing whatever, and then those extreme lows. And when that's all you know, you're not going to be able to acknowledge anything in between. Um, you know, for you, what was it like when you began this transformational change for those around you? Because I am a firm believer that, like, for me, I'm a firm believer, for me, that, like, my illness kind of, and my issues was an illness of the family. I know at this point you had already moved out, and you're charting your own path. Um, but the people who are in the most close proximity, um, how do you think your transformation has impacted those who you love?
Well, I think there's one thing that I could share with people is that you can't always get well in the same environment that made you sick.
Mm,
And there was a lot of things and people I had to kind of address and let go of. And when I did do that, I took responsibility. I didn't point the finger, I didn't point the blame. I said, "Hey, I'm sorry I couldn't show up any differently, but I've been wearing a mask and I've been wearing a facade and I haven't been telling you the truth about how I really feel. And I gotta do me." And that was really hard. But I knew if I kept those people and circumstances around, I was never going to be who I knew God created me to be. And so that was the first. And then there was just like a lot of confrontation at first because I was confronting myself and I was also confronting my family. And I feel like I felt anger for the first time in my life, to not say, like, I'm not lying about this anymore. I'm not suppressing this. We need to
I
address
just want to
this.
interrupt. Do you
So
think you felt anger, or you acknowledged anger, or you allowed yourself to, like, feel it?
yeah, for sure. I allowed myself. It was like an unfamiliar, like, I'm actually pissed off about how we've addressed our whole life. And this is what's made me so sick for so long is that we've lived in delusion, we've lived in a lie. And it's what had us survive our life. And that's what we needed to do in order to get up and have my mom work and, try to save my dad's life all the time. We had to just keep going, and it serves a purpose in your life, and it's created a tremendous amount of resilience in my life. But then that trauma and that pain and that those things that happen to you and you just completely suppress, especially like big life events, those things they stay in your tissue, it stays in your body, you don't
Hmm.
forget, and then it shows up in anxiety and depression because it was never spoken about, it was never acknowledged, there was no truth brought to the light. And so there was this period of my healing where I was just angry. I was angry and I was upset and I was trying to manage my emotions for the first time ever because I was just always like dissociated or like tunnel vision or just pretending like nothing happened, like we've always done. And so, but after that, it took like a good 6 months to kind of reestablish boundaries, not be codependent, say, this is who I am now and this is what I'm doing. And if you want to be a part of it, I would love for you to be on board. But these are things that I'm no longer settling for, engaging in, or talking about or doing. And it took some adjusting, but I have the most fulfilling, beautiful relationships in my life now. And they're all of integrity and truth and love and goodness and encouragement. And yeah, I'm just like, especially if I'm integrating a new friend into my life, like that takes a lot for me because I love my life and I love who I am and my values. And like, I want you to come into my life and add value too. So, like, having that person be someone who pours back into me, where I was very used to people not pouring into me and I just was always pouring into other people, that is definitely something that I look for and value in like a friendship or a relationship.
God, I love that. I mean, I totally agree with you. And um, like, for me, growth. I think the one thing that people don't talk about so much is that growth is and can be a lonely process. And like, that was very much what it was like for me, where it's like, the I think on the recovery component, you're like, I know I can't hang out with these people anymore. And
Yeah. Yeah.
um you know what I mean? Like, I can't be hanging out with my coke dealer. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
can't be
Yeah.
hanging out with at the bar. Like there's certain things that, like, obviously people that you need to cut out of your life. But, like, as you grow, like, for me, like, a lot of relationships that I was very concerned that I would have to like go to them and be like, hey man, like I don't think, we could hang out. Like no, they organically fell off. Um, there was some like that. And with family, one of the things I had to do was accept my family members for who they were,
Yeah.
and stop trying to change them. That was like the biggest thing for me. Where, like I can't impose my will onto you to respond to the way that I want you to, especially like, a family member who, I'm thinking about my dad. Like he's an old guy. He's not going to change the way he thinks. And rather, it's important for me to just um, kind of look at it through their eyes for a second. And when I was able to like do that, I was able to kind of accept him for who he was. That was really the first step. And then the second step was like, all right, like we're going to put boundaries on this relationship because, too much of you and me together doesn't usually end well because we'll butt heads. We're very similar. But, I found that like when you do that with people, they respect you, they
Yeah.
respect you and, like they really want to like, um, yeah, like add value to your life and like and the conversations aren't surface level because now you're like trying to grow and not only understand the other person better but like see what the other person can do to help you better understand yourself. And those are the type of relationships that I have right now, which is wild because like I didn't really know what like and I'm not talking about relationships as much as like friendships and like the people who like are on my like I call it my quote unquote board of directors where like I could like bounce things off of and like like if I need something like that's how I go to. And in the past it was just like kind of like all right, like I'll be friends with you, like here's my number. And now it's like I wasted a lot of time with people who weren't adding any value to my life and ignoring my own needs. um like when you um now that you kind of have your safe space and your safe circle, what do you do on a daily basis to continue cultivate these relationships, and also to just um like just kind of continue your growth journey?
So we'll probably do like we'll get together for walks or we'll do workouts together. Like I always like to incorporate people into the daily things that I do and love, and that's finding people who like love fitness or love working out or love going on walks. So I'll definitely like that's like the biggest way that I stay connected, or you know, coming over for a meal or cooking or going out to eat together. Like we definitely make it a point once every 2 weeks to get together in that capacity.
Nice. I want to talk about Phoenix Fit and like the inspiration behind it and um like how what your plans are for it.
Yeah. So again, I started my podcast in 2019 and I was on the floor. That was the last abusive relationship I was in. I started on the floor on a beanbag with a $25 microphone. And I'd come really
Hmm.
far in my life. You know, I'd come really, really far. I'd, overcome bulimia. I'm, a really fit person. I had a lot going on, but I still had that one thorn in my side, which was like I couldn't get that part of my life together, which was relationships. And so I knew that Phoenix Fit couldn't really be born until those things were addressed. Like again, I don't think in a position of leadership you could have something like that going on. It's not to say you can't have relationship issues, but I'm saying like if you're like intentionally deliberately dating men who are abusive towards you, it's very hard to be the space of healing and leadership for other people. So I said, okay, there's three parts of my vision, which one was my podcast, two was Phoenix Fit, and three is like, public speaking or like a wellness center, like that's like a 10-year vision. And so I would said, okay, I'm going to show up and record my podcast, share my life, share my healing journey. And when the time does come, I will have planted seeds in listeners to then develop Phoenix Fit. And so what was so beautiful, like when Phoenix Fit was developing, at first I was going to call it Wholesome perspective. And I was trying to like wrestle these certain like concepts and to get my idea into a program and to structure it. I was like, okay. And then really when I started to burn the boats in my life and I started to see the personal transformation of like really what it took to like transform and change, I was like, oh, wow, it really does take burning all the boats. Like when you've lived 90% of your life as deadwood and you've never developed a sense of authenticity and like truth for yourself and you've operated out of survival tactics and like your personality is basically one big trauma response, I thought, well, I have to burn like 90% of who I am. And
Mm.
when I did that, I thought, man, like it really does take burning. It really does take burning everything and then like rebuilding from a different perspective and rebuilding from a different identity and rebuilding from a value system and rebuild like all these things that I like started to rebuild myself in. And then I put it into a program and I thought, yeah, that's it. And you got to be fit for it. It's not easy. But I tell people it's really hard to be not who you are. It's hard either way. And it's like you choose your hard, at least one hard of leading a life of authenticity and addressing your wounds or issues will lead you towards a path of light. And then there's this path of darkness that you're familiar with, that you know what it feels like to live in that kind of hell. I was like, choose your hard. And I was like, man, like I was this fit person who would eat well, work out, drive a business, personal train, but having that one component of like the unaddressed emotional health and trauma in my personal relationships spoiled all aspects of my life. And when I addressed those things, oh my gosh, like all the work I'd putting in all these years, like really flourished when Phoenix Fit was developed. And it's going great. I'm on my third year of business and I'm just love to get to do what I do.
That's awesome. And I love how you stress the importance of like, yeah, like breaking everything apart first and starting from scratch, because that's like so important. Like you can't build on a shitty foundation, and like that's like so, like people don't look at it that way. They look at it like I could like block everything out, start fresh, forget everything. But no, like you alluded to it earlier in the conversation, where like we carry these things, and it's it's crippling from the inside out, and like that's so important because it almost reminded me the way that you just described that as like Navy SEAL training, where they break you completely down and then they build you back up to how you need to be. And that was awesome, just hearing you share about like the process. um you talked about um your podcast, and I do think your podcast is awesome because it's you narrating your journey and your story, which obviously is unique. Here we are, like I have guests on my podcast. um what was like the early stages of your podcast? I know for me, I was like, shit, like what am I gonna, how am I gonna structure conversations, like, and who should I invite on? It's just like your thoughts, your journey, your story. What was it like in the beginning?
It was, I got to the point where I was so sad of being sad about not doing it that I thought I just got to do it. I told myself like I was so caught up on like it was funny. Nick helped me with the production and like the microphones. The thing that I bought from him was right next to me years ago, and I thought, okay, I was so obsessed about doing it right, the name of it, the cover, all those things. It was just a way to procrastinate, and it was a way to
Yep.
procrastinate. And I was like, you know what? Okay, if I don't do this tomorrow, it's going to be named the Kate Hastings podcast. I'm going to create a thing on Canva, black and white with a microphone. And you know what? Tomorrow came and I didn't have a name. So you know what I did? I did that very
That's
podcast
so
cover.
funny.
And yeah, my first episode is like 4 minutes long. It echoes. It sounds like absolute garbage. And I thought it's my favorite episode ever. It's my favorite episode ever because like it started like that. And I remember I was at a jujitsu competition and this guy who I never thought would listen, he came up to me. It was like my sixth episode in. He was like, "Hey, like your podcast is actually pretty good, but it sounds terrible." So I like got, and then like I never even listened to it. I never even edited it. I never even like re-listened to it. I would just upload it. And I actually still do that to this day. I don't edit. I just like put it out there. There's no intro, there's no outro. I just kept it really simple, and the simplicity has kept it very easy for me to succeed and to be consistent in my podcast. And now I'm 2024, I want to upgrade it and do different things with it. But in the beginning, I thought I need to aim so low that I need to be able to succeed in this, because the fear of paralyzing perfection and the fear of having to get it right has been something that's kept me in a very low place. And I'm willing to look bad. I'm willing to make it look like I don't know what I'm doing. And I think those are the most
Mm.
beautiful beginnings to things, because a lot of people don't take action, and people want to talk to me sometimes and say, how did you do all this? And I say, I'll tell you, but I guarantee you won't do it, but I'll tell you how I did it.
Yeah, 'cause it's so funny that you say that, because I feel like that's where I'm at, like in that early stage where like even if you like go on the Instagram my thing, you'll see like within like the past like 3 months, like it's like this style, then it's like this style, now it's like this
Yeah.
style, and it's like guys, I'm figuring it out, and I think that's like part of the journey on this for this podcast, where it's like, you know what, like not episode's gonna be perfect, not every conversation is gonna be like like I'm gonna stumble. I'm going to, the messaging is whatever. I'm having conversations, and people are um, sharing, like insightful things about their journey, and like, but yeah, like I was very much the same way in the beginning, where I was like, all right, like what, like I'm gonna do this tomorrow. Like, who should I have on? And like, at that point, like somebody was like, all right, just do like a solo episode. I ended up recording a solo episode and then not ever releasing, which I probably should actually. But I was very, very self conscious at first, because you know one of the things that I like get sometimes catch myself doing is the comparison game. So I was like, oh, like theirs look like that, theirs look like that, theirs like that, I want mine to look like that. But at the end of the day, now that I've been doing it for a little bit, like now I have people reaching out to me being like, hey, like I want to sit down with you. And I'm like, all right, like cool, like like I don't know, it's just like a journey. But like
Mhm.
for you, um like I think yours was like the motivation behind it and the story behind it is just powerful, and it's almost like it was an outlet for you in the beginning,
Mhm.
and like once you got things out into the universe, like it probably was pretty freeing.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I think for a long time I didn't even realize how healing it was to share from a place of my microphone and myself. And rarely did I hear from anyone at first. I never checked my stats. I never cared to look. I just thought, like, I know God put something in me to share, and I have the gift of speaking, and I just
Yeah.
have to be willing to pursue it, because the opposite is way more detrimental, to live out your fears, than it is to. I know what it's like to live for the world. I know what the world has to offer as far as like partying, sex, lying, whatever, drugs, drinking, not taking action, not being honest. I really know that world. And I was like, let me try to take a chance on something I don't know and be fearful in other ways, because this type of fear is paralyzing and it's not getting me anywhere. And I have to be able to take a chance on something that's fear will always be a part of our nature. And you just have to build courage in the right direction, where that's where I kind of understood I kept going in the wrong direction. Even I was a disciplined person. I was like, okay, these results aren't like, they don't bear fruit. If you're not bearing fruit in your life, there's a big indicator that you're not like, you're in a misalignment, or it's not for the right reason, or it's not in alignment with like maybe your purpose. And I thought, okay, let's see where this goes. If I don't give up, then I will win one day. I don't know when.
Yeah, I love that. Like you mentioned purpose, and obviously that's the name of this podcast, so I do want to kind of just jump into um for purpose for you. Like I know for you it involved filling a god-sized hole, and once you're able to do that, um your purpose aligned, what would you say is something that you do on a daily basis to like feed your purpose and further your purpose, and to impact others?
And I'll bring it back to, first and foremost, like prayer is a big part of my life, prayer and communion with God, reading the word daily, and then just working to reflect and serve people from a place of love. Like love really does
Mm,
transform people. I think it's very kindness, compassion, love is just something that I actively pursue daily with people, whether it's you're my mailman, whether you're a stranger, when you're someone on the street, people at the gym, a client, like that is like my sole purpose is to just love and serve people and to be healthy, to take care of myself. Like I really take my sleep seriously. I take what I eat. I take the movement in my body. I take my rest days. I do all that because I can't be that for people if I'm burnt out, which is where I was for a long time because I was trying to please people all the time. And now my life is meant to please and serve God. And I'm like so filled with his love that I'm just like energized from him. And then I'm like able to be with people. But I first need to take care of my mind, body, soul, and spirit. So
Awesome. What advice would you give to folks who are struggling to find their purpose or are on the early stages of charting their path?
So I think there's like always like my first career was a makeup artist and I was quite successful as a makeup artist. In my second career, I was a florist designer. And my third career, I became a personal trainer, which then led to eventually, podcasting and launching into Phoenix Fit and combining all of that. And I think that there's this idea that we have to be this one thing. But at the core of all those things, like there's this creative aspect to me, there's this loving aspect, there's this place that I love to serve and give and to create and to contribute. And that's something that is a great need of mine. Like I could never work behind a desk and do numbers, right? One, I'm dyslexic. Two,
Mm,
it would fill no
sorry.
purpose in my soul. You're dyslexic too?
No, I'm not. No, but like the way you
Oh,
said it is
oh.
like one, I'm dyslexic.
Yeah, it's true. It's a fact. It's okay. I don't
Yeah,
identify like, oh, that's my identity, but I do struggle immensely with numbers.
yeah.
So, at the core of all those things, all those like those roles that I fulfilled, I love to transform people. I love to give. I love to serve. And that looked like very different things throughout our life. I know if you're going to be a lawyer and a doctor, you got to like know that that's your thing, right? Because you got to go to school, it's $100,000 debt, whatever. But I don't think that we need to necessarily be this one thing, but we do need to fulfill our needs. And my need is to love and to serve and to contribute and to give to other people. And then I think sometimes we get on that obsessive thinking like, oh, I need to figure it all out. It's like if you're paralyzed by figuring out your purpose, I tell someone, write down everything you're afraid of and do all those things. And I promise you it will lead to your purpose because we're always afraid of something. And if it's like public speaking, like join a Toastmasters, if it's like relationship, like address those fears and you build this confidence and this courage. We're so weighed down by our fears. We're so weighed down by like insecurities and comparison and all these things. I say, you got to address those things because like my purpose really started to flourish when like those things were addressed and I could fully like thrive in my purpose because I wasn't weighed down. Not to say like things
Mm,
don't scare me and there's things that I struggle with, but it doesn't control or divert me from my purpose anymore, which is before it did. Like people pleasing diverted me from my purpose. Abusive relationships, all those things divert you from purpose. So it's like address your stuff, to be honest.
yeah, yeah, and don't let fears have power over you. Um, you know, question, you talked about public speaking. What have you been doing? Like because I would love to like go to one of your public speaking
I
engagements. Like honestly, like
haven't
I
done
think that's
anything.
awesome.
I haven't
Okay,
done anything
like
yet.
you'd be great at it. You're a natural speaker, you're a natural communicator, and you carry such a powerful message. So like when you do, like sign me up. Like
Okay,
I'm
I'll send you a
down.
ticket.
Me and Nick will come down. We'll be in the front row.
No,
But
you
no,
can't
like
be in the front row.
I
Nick's gonna crack jokes.
that's true. He'll be well, he's a big guy, so we'll put him like
Yeah.
someplace in the middle. But no, like I just really loved like this conversation, and I love the way that you speak, and I love how passionately you are with your faith because I think um you know your relationship with God like it just answers so many um just so many holes that people have in their lives that um it's just like it's amazing. Um, can you please? Sorry. Well, I'm just gonna jump right in after that and say like people do have faith in their life, but it's always like faith in like to say that you don't have any faith is stupid. You just have faith in the wrong things. Like you have faith that the bills are going to show up. You have faith that this deadline's going to come up. You have faith in all sorts of things. But if you had the faith of God to carry you through these things that are coming up in your life, then like they're much easier to face. And that's something where just like kind of like a story, like that was a huge thing that helped me kind of realign where I had faith in, because when I was actively using, I had faith in all the evil. I had faith in all the vice. I had faith in all the negative, shady characters in my life to show up and like me and and me to do the things that I was doing. So like why can't I direct that faith towards something powerful and divine, and so like that was something that like was a eye opener for me, where I was able to just literally direct my faith towards something more powerful and more redeeming. But I'm super grateful to have had this conversation. Can you just let my audience know how they can get in touch with you, and a little bit about your coaching program and whatnot? Love that. Phoenix Fit, Kate Hastings podcast. Is that anywhere you can find podcasts? Do you have a YouTube channel also? Beautiful. The Kate Hastings podcast, Kate Hastings one on Instagram, right? Coach K1. Oh, I'm the worst. Sorry, I'll edit that out. But I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Kate.